Hi guys, welcome to Counterpoints. My name is Connor, and today we're going to be talking about Hunter Avallone, honor, and the limits of liberalism. In the past few weeks, Hunter Avallone and his wife Carissa announced their divorce. To put it mildly, this has been one of the most shocking incidents to happen in Twitch and YouTube politics for a variety of sordid reasons I promise to explain. I'll be a little bit more tactful than most because it's not my goal to hurt anyone involved in this video, but I do view it as my job to break down why this is a nuclear level meltdown for reasons I don't think anyone else can or will articulate. I believe this incident is controversial because 1. Hunter is by himself controversial. 2. People believe the divorce is the result of his turn-heel political shift. 3. Hunter has abandoned core conservative principles he used to champion. 4. There are levels of degenerate sexual behavior that would shock all but the most deviant of progressives. And 5. This is nestled in the culture war over the future of the Western world between conservatives and progressives, with being an example of progressive moral collapse that is likely to be used as anti-progressive propaganda for the next decade easily. To set the stage, Hunter used to be a fairly edgy skit creator picking on social justice warriors, trans folk, and cucks, always skirting the limits of terms of service. Hunter accumulated around 500,000 subscribers on YouTube and had a healthy view count, propelling him amongst some of the largest creators of the 2015 to 2020 anti-social justice warrior phenomena. Hunter took a huge algorithmic clout and popularity hit when he transitioned first to a more left-leaning, sympathetic position before gradually drifting back center on a few issues. Despite dialing into a more moderate position, his algorithmic momentum had largely stalled. Despite having very impressive subscription numbers and moderately impressive monthly view numbers, it is still a shadow of what his channel would have been if he had simply stayed the course or slowly shifted center. Some have accused him of betraying his principles, while others have applauded his abrupt change, believing it to be a sign of his sincerity that he was willing to sacrifice so much so quickly. Before we continue, I need to say, I wish Hunter in particular no ill will. I wish him and his kids well, and I hope that his ex-wife is doing physically and mentally as well as can be expected under the circumstances. That being said, I do have criticisms of their current situation and want to nest my criticisms in a few things a lot deeper. The deeper concepts are marriage, honor, and how liberalism is a good governing philosophy, but a dogshit moral one. First, let's talk marriage. There are signs that even prehistoric men and women operated in monogamous family structures. From a biological standpoint, this makes sense. It seems at the base of our lizard brain is the desire to create, care for, and protect our genetic lines. This was a largely hardscrabble affair with various human tribal groups hunting down animals, gathering fruits and vegetables and seeds, and barely surviving tribal war, disease, and childbirth. While I'm sure that tribal traditions like monogamous pair bonding existed, I doubt they were the complex, written, legal contracts that we deal with today. It seems like with the agricultural revolution and the advent of written language, humans attempted to codify morality. I'm not a religious literalist, but I do believe that spiritual and religious people were picking at something very real. While hallucinating in psychedelic and calorie-deprived vision quests, they observed good and bad behaviors in human beings that seemed to lead them to happy and miserable lives. They meditated on dietary, drug, and sexual habits that led to family and happy children, and habits that resulted in misery, disease, and early death. Now, this is where marriage as a formal and culturally sanctioned institution began. If men were going to dedicate their lives to difficult labor, tending to the land, and fighting the wars of their kingdom, they wanted to know that their efforts weren't in vain. They also wanted a guaranteed mechanism to pass wealth across families and generations. Societies came up with marriage gifts like dowries and inheritance to guarantee the culminated efforts of their lives were delivered to their offspring. This was evolutionarily advantageous because while pagans who were having sexual free-for-alls and raising children not belonging to them squandered familial wealth, those who adhered to the contracts were able to secure their progeny's survival against disease, invasion, and poverty. The structure was also advantageous to women who leveraged their man's honor against rape, children not sanctified by marriage, and sexually transmitted disease before the invention of condoms and antibiotics. This entire contractual arrangement was nestled in the idea of God, that there was a creator whose prophets had observed his laws, who had passed them on to the rest of society, and those who followed those laws would flourish, and those who did not would die. This was often literally true. People died from avenging the honor of raped women in affairs, people died from sexually transmitted disease, and people died from defying the social enforcement of these norms on society by the state. This arrangement, while not totally enforced, created a social pressure towards the monogamous family nestled in religion and an extreme risk to sexually aberrant behavior. This drastically changed with the industrial and subsequent sexual revolution. Industry gave the world's working and middle classes never-before-seen wealth, and with it, an escape from the fear of starvation. Paternity became less of a concern because the human species as a whole exploded in population and now dominates the globe. Contraception, antibiotics, and abortion are all readily available solutions to the problems of unwanted pregnancy and disease. Our culture and traditions, especially marriage, have not caught up with these developments. Marriage, a contract sanctified by the creator of the universe, necessary to pass familial wealth and to guarantee paternity, is ideal, but no longer necessary. With secularism and anti-theism taking hold, abiding by Iron Age moral prescriptions and perspectives on sex no longer hold. Honor is no longer required in our society and is actually derided. Which brings us to the concept of honor. Honor, put simply, is having a standard of conduct, adhering to it to the best of your ability, and other people holding you in higher esteem for it. This is scorned in our society. American consumerism states that as long as your conduct is legal, your measure as a human being is only estimated in how much money you can accumulate and the goods you can procure. Secularism and anti-theism suggest that there is no God, no ordered force judging your behavior, and at the end of life is perpetual thoughtless oblivion. As a result, all life really should be is a pleasure roller coaster to enjoy as many sensations as possible before you check out into eternity. Liberalism states that as long as involved parties in any behavior do not harm others who have not consented to that behavior, then they are permitted by the state to engage. Progressivism states that judging any of the above as bad is a bigoted sentiment formed out of religious dogmatism and cannot be defended in the light of secular post-modernity. I say, fuck that. I say that even in our fallen society, you should study the Iron Age mythologies and histories of our ancestors and see what they believe to be right and wrong. I say that you should evaluate what is right and wrong and either copy the codes of your peers and parents or create your own code. I say you should struggle and fail, but try in earnestness to adhere to a code that fulfills your sense of honor. I say that when people act dishonorably around you, you should view it as your job to tactfully, patiently, and with love tell them why you think they're wrong and what you believe would have been a better series of actions. I say marriage is not some Iron Age abstraction, but a vow two people to submit themselves to each other and to their progeny. I say that marriage is an excellent vehicle to guard the material, moral, and spiritual interests of your family, and you should find peer families with similar values to live in community with. I say that people ignore the religions, histories, philosophy, and morality of historical and contemporary people at their peril, and I say they will pay dear prices for their mistakes. In my estimation, Hunter was a conservative who followed the moral codes of his family and religion uncritically. He did not study the histories of his people and thus became good at surface-level propaganda. However, when confronted with well-researched and compelling left-wing arguments, he simply fell for them because he never challenged his own belief structure. Hunter mistook the leftists having compelling arguments as conservatism being fundamentally wrong. In the subsequent confusion, Hunter adopted a liberal and progressive attitude on sex, tolerating the impulses of his wife to his family's detriment. When it came to Carissa, I believe that she was likewise stifled by her family and religion, that she felt she never got to explore her own personhood or sexuality before being shoehorned into a traditionally conservative mother archetype. The unexplored and unrealized parts of her personhood became resentment toward religion and marriage for forcing her down a path she barely had time to consider. Liberal and progressive attitudes on sex likely felt like an escape vector through which she could realize long-repressed impulses. Notably, this involved exchanging extremely sexual messages with people other than her husband for money, fantasizing about sleeping with a dozen men post-divorce, treating her sexuality like a video game to level up, and considering a gangbang and piss play as a part of a scheme to make a few $1,000s for her and Hunter to separate. I have heard both Hunter and Carissa express anti-theistic sentiment, and so I'm not surprised at the trap they fell into. Because there is no God, there is no judgment. Because there's no judgment, there's no afterlife. Since there's no afterlife, there's only the pleasure available that you can get in this life, and since that's the only pleasure available, why not pursue it to the detriment of all else? To quote Carl Jung, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. For both Hunter and Carissa, they have long ignored their shadows, and it paid them back 1,000-fold. Without religion, marriage, or community as guiding principles, Hunter participated in behaviors that were detrimental to his family. He tolerated them because that is what he believed to be right under a liberal and progressive view of sex. Carissa indulged in the temptations of her shadow and, in spite of the future interest of her children, solicited sexual advances from strangers and considered breaching nearly every sexual and social taboo known to man to make a few $1,000s to help end her marriage. And I do judge this. It violates my sense of honor and should outrage anyone with a scrap of it. Unfortunately for me, we live in a liberal society, and since all the participants are consenting adults, the most I can do is criticize them publicly. There are not many people who can articulate why any of this is bad besides reflexive appeals to disgust, and I don't view that as a failure of liberalism or progressivism, but of conservatism. People either cling to Iron Age dogmatism that clearly cannot survive the modern world, or they embrace nihilist hedonism that collapses in on itself like a black hole. And so this is what I say to conservatives. Do not simply tell your children that they should obey religion because God says so. Do not simply engage with history and religion at the surface level, lest you fall into dishonorable behavior yourself. Do not treat your belief in God as some kind of moral save checkpoint where all your behavior from then on is correct because you have the correct beliefs. Read, study, critique, ponder, and share your beliefs. Build your families and communities stone by stone. Reach out, counsel, and correct the behavior of others as best you can without being a cunt, and figure out what honor means to you, and then try to live with a sense of it for the rest of your life.